The third of the 8 Beatitudes is one I need to remember every single time I go to the Department of Motor Vehicles.
If your desire is to become spiritually stronger, emotionally healthier, and relationally smarter, you're at the right place. Speaker and writer Stephanie Smith inspires and equips you to achieve these 3 key aims. If you're a parent, you'll also learn how to raise empowered kids, ready for adulthood. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I am delighted that you are here with me today. This podcast is growing and just more people are tuning in, and I love being able to hear from you. And one of the things that you can do to move more into a dialogue and learn a little bit more about the other resources that I have and other ways that I am working to help you become spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart is you can go to the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for the weekly newsletter, High Impact. You're going to get information on the podcasts that are coming out. And also, a lot of times I record links to other people's podcasts or articles or books or just resources that will help you, because there's so much out there. And sometimes it's just one idea, one insight, one resource that can make a world of difference. And I know how true that is for me. And I want to be generous to share that information with you. I opened today by talking about how every time I go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, I need to remember this third of the 8 Beatitudes. It is this one: Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Why do I need this particular one? On one occasion, I had to make 3 trips back to this department in order to just get a very basic business thing taken care of. I don't remember if it was tags or license or whatever it was, but it was something very simple. And I thought I had all my documents, and then I show up and they're like, oh, no, actually you need to have blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, but in the form here, which these forms were sitting over on the table in the front of this office, you need to have, something else. And I said, but wait just a minute, because here on this form, it lists these are the things that I need to have, and I have all of these. And the answer that I got, I kid you not, was, oh, well, we don't print those forms. There's another state agency that prints those forms. Have you ever had those experiences where you just want to look at somebody and like your mouth just wants to drop open like a gaping fish, and you think, tell me I didn't just hear what you said. You're telling me that the forms over there that have this department's name and logo and information on there, I can't rely on what those forms say because they're printed by a different department in the government? Oh, yeah. So you gotta love how government works sometimes, right? Anyway, I would love to say that I left all 3 of those times with just the right, perfect Christ-like attitude, but I would be lying. It actually was a real lesson for me in what we're going to talk about today, which is meekness. I doubt that meekness is a word that is a hot topic on Instagram or social media or Facebook or Google searches or whatever. I mean, I certainly, in my realm of influence, I'm certainly not seeing a lot of people advocating, hey, you can sign up for my course. You can follow me on social media. Hey, if you just invest in my program or you buy my book, you are going to become meek. I have not seen that yet. But Jesus himself said, blessed, remember what we talked about before, that means happy are those who are meek. Why? Because they will inherit the earth. I'm guessing that the Jews who were listening to that at the time that Jesus delivered that pronouncement when he was living here on earth had to look at each other and say, did he just say what we think he said? Because is he very in tune to how the world works here? because they were living as a conquered people. They had been conquered by Rome, and Rome did not conquer the earth as it was known at the time in terms of civilizations and this vast amount of people and geography that they ruled over, which included parts of Africa and Asia and Europe. They hadn't conquered all of that because they were known for meekness. It was quite the other thing. And so looking around, it was like, excuse me, Jesus, but it seems to me that Rome has been inheriting the earth around here for quite a long time, actually. And they came by this as a result of power, force, and pretty much seeing themselves as the best. Not this whole meekness thing that you're talking about. So what was Jesus talking about, not just for the people then, but something that still applies for us today? Well, first let's talk about what he's not saying. Meekness has a way of changing its meaning and culture over time, just as language does. Words can change their meaning. They're not fixed in terms of what they mean for all people for all time. We all know that. And meekness is something that, at least here in the United States, and I think probably in Western culture, has become associated with being wimpy, with being soft, with lacking ambition, just somebody who's, just all sugary sweet, and they would never, fight for anything. And that is not what meekness is. Meekness is about a substance of a person's character. It's not about style. And we would do well to learn to make the distinction in our lives for ourselves and for other people, the difference between what is style and what is substance. Sometimes people can have a style that seems to be very beautiful and very wonderful, but that doesn't mean that it's actually a matter of substance. When we look at this aspect of meekness, it can seem like, that person is really meek because they seem so soft and they're just so charitable and they're just so kind, and they never are the one who's going to create any kind of conflict. That doesn't necessarily mean that person is meek. It might be a matter that person is actually incredibly insecure, and they are not going to raise any kind of conflict ever because they want somebody else's approval. They don't want to stir the pot, so to speak. It can also sometimes be a way of manipulating, not necessarily in a very deliberate way, but it can become a way of manipulation. But we can talk about that at another time. What meekness is it is an attitude about our position. It's how we see ourselves and our place in the world. There is a gentleness, a humility, a courteousness, a consideration that is evident in someone who is meek. Again, this is not the same as a person who has no ambition. It's not about that. You see, when Jesus opens the first Beatitude, he talks and he says that blessed are the poor in spirit. And we talked about that a couple of episodes back. And it was people who lived aligned with the reality that we live in a place of poverty. And the only way that we have what we need is when we recognize our dependence on God. And once we recognize and we really live the reality of our complete dependence on God, then what can we expect? Then we expect to be able to live in the kingdom of heaven. And again, we're not just talking about getting to heaven someday when we die. We're talking about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. That's living in a way that's aligned as much as it's possible on this earth with the way that God designed us originally in a sin-free state to live in relationship with ourselves, with Him, and with one another. And then the second Beatitude was about mourning. And we talked about that last Tuesday's episode. And certainly it's about mourning and grieving the losses that we experience in this life. But it's also about a mourning that comes because we recognize how great our need is. When we recognize how much work that we need done in our character, because we see how by default we can be so selfish, so self-absorbed, and that can come out in a lot of different stylistic ways, but the substance is, as people, by default, we are incredibly self-absorbed human beings. And in order for that to not remain our character, that's a process of work that has to be done. But we are powerless to do all of that on our own. Now, God doesn't come in and wave some magic wand and poof, all of a sudden we're great. This is about a partnership where we choose our thoughts, we choose what we believe, we make choices about how we're going to respond, we make choices about how we're going to respond to external circumstances. We also make choices about how we're going to respond to impulses that we have within us. Once we have a poorness of spirit, and once we recognize this position of mourning that we are in, it opens us then, it makes sense then that the next beatitude would be, blessed are the meek. You see, if I recognize that I am entirely dependent on God for my survival, but I am also entirely dependent on God to shape my character, that there are things that I can do, but I'm going to reach a limiting point because at a certain place, I'm just going to run out of steam. I'm not going to be able to do all the work that needs to be done. I'm not even going to have the desire to do the work that needs to be done apart from God. And when I live in the reality of those first two Beatitudes, I'm not going to see myself as somebody who needs to walk into the room and I've got to throw my weight around and I've got to conquer and it's all about me. I'm not going to be threatened by other people's success. I'm also not going to be intimidated by other people's rejection. Now, again, that's an ideal and that we work towards. So we don't want to beat ourselves up when we're still very much this work in progress. But that's what we are working for, that we will not feel like, oh, we have to gain other people's approval, nor do we think we have to put other people in their place and let them know that we are more important and our needs count more and they should be serving us and we're the best thing that sends sliced bread. No, that is not the position that we occupy as we move throughout life when we live with an attitude of meekness. There is nothing wimpy or weak about meekness. It takes a tremendous strength to be kind when you are in a situation where the people around you are not kind. It takes strength to choose to be considerate and not tell somebody off like at the DMV's office when they give you one of those responses that you just kind of think, what in the world? How stupid is this? It takes strength to be courteous, whether it's to those other drivers on the road who irritate you, to be courteous to staff, to the cashier at the store, to in-laws maybe, and your own siblings and your own family members. There are times that we're in positions and in places and circumstances that we have to choose, if we want to really walk out this kingdom living, gentleness, humility, consideration, and courteousness. That's the essence of what being meek is. And Jesus promises when he says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, it's interesting and important to note, he does not say, for they will inherit heaven. He says, for they will inherit the earth. Now, he's not talking about a land grab. Hey, if you're meek, then somehow God's going to give you that piece of property you want. What he's talking about is life on this earth lived as part of the kingdom of heaven that's come to this earth. That the way that we have our character transformed, the way that we can walk in relationship with God, the way that our relationship and how we perceive ourselves changes, the way that we walk in relationship with others, when it becomes more and more aligned with how God originally designed us to live, that is what living in the kingdom is about. It's not about wealth. It's not about power. It's not about fame. It is about our spirit and our soul and our character becoming who we were originally designed to be. It's really becoming fully alive. And when a person is meek, when they are gentle, when they are considerate, when they are courteous, when they live in a place of humility, they will inherit the kingdom of heaven here on this earth. And I think that's important to understand. He doesn't say, hey, you know what? If you are meek here, and if you just manage to hang on to meekness for a long enough period of time in large enough quantities, someday you're going to get to make it to heaven. And then, shoo, you can just kind of wipe your brow and go, boy, I'm glad that is over. Because meekness takes work. But that's not what he's talking about. He's saying, no. There is benefit in living in meekness here on earth. And you will inherit the kingdom of heaven here on this earth if you choose to walk in a position of humility and gentleness and consideration and courteousness. You know, Moses was described in Numbers as the meekest man who had lived, and yet he was one of the most phenomenal leaders that we have actually throughout history, but defined and described in Scripture. Did he make some significant mistakes? Yes, he did. And that's one of the things that I love about the Bible is that it doesn't just whitewash people. I mean, it kind of puts in the good, the bad, and the ugly, which lets us know that, one, God is very interested and committed to honesty and reality. And it also helps us to have hope that God can work with and through anyone, not just those who attain some level of perfection, because none of us ever do. And when we realize that, that realization actually is something that can move us back into that position of meekness. So make this very practical. Don't just think about this theoretically and think, oh yeah, that sounds good. But where are the places, maybe like the Department of Motor Vehicles, or maybe it's someplace else for you, who are the people who tax you the most and who make it the hardest for you to practice walking in a position of meekness? You know, after I had that experience where I had to make 3 separate trips back to the DMV to finally get everything taken care of, later when I had to go back another time, I had a talking to myself before I went. And I kind of, scheduled my own come to Jesus moment, like literally, of saying, Steph, you are going to get your attitude straight before you go. So if by any chance you happen to get there and you encounter that you are missing something that you think you have, and or there's some other new form or whatever, you are going to decide ahead of time that you are going to have a right spirit and a right response, and you will walk this out where you will be considerate and you will be courteous, not just with what you say, but truly within your heart. Had I ever, chewed somebody out there? No, but could I have? Yeah, because it was very much in my heart on some of those first visits. But it was about what was in my heart. And so I just want to encourage you to make these Beatitudes and all of this teaching real. You don't want to just listen to it. Jesus said, was talking about that it's not just a person who hears the words that is a follower of his. It is a person who hears and then does. That's the mark of being a disciple of Christ. So I just encourage you to have a right understanding of what meekness is, and then think about at least one, maybe two places or people in your life where you can be more intentional to say, God, I am poor in spirit in this area. I need you to empower me, give me the awareness, give me the desire, and then give me the skills so that I can practice walking in meekness here on this earth. All right, my friend, that's going to wrap us up for today. Again, if you haven't already, hop over to the website, stephaniepresents.com, sign up for High Impact, check out speaking engagements and other things there. Remember this, my friend, you have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for High Impact to join the mission of building spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart women and families. You can also book Stephanie to speak at your event and check out additional resources. Together, we can invite and equip generations to engage fully in God's grand story.